Introducing NASM 1, NASM's ultimate membership program. Unlock access to everything your fitness career needs to succeed. Unlimited CEUs, free courses, access to our premium app, and exclusive discounts, all for $35 a month. NASM 1 is best-in-class tools, cutting-edge certifications, confidence in your craft, and everything you do as a personal trainer made easy, so we can achieve our greatest goals together as one.
You're listening to the Peak Physique Podcast with Andre Adams on the NASM Podcast Network.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to this week's episode of the Peak Physique Podcast. I'm your host, Andre Adams, NASM Master Trainer and IFBB Olympian athlete. This week, we've got a short and sweet episode on one of my favorite topics, which is chest development. So I'm going to lay out some tips for developing the chest, the pectoral muscles, for all you guys that are physique athletes, bodybuilders, or you're just looking to improve your aesthetics for, muscular physique goal. So let's start with, why is chest development important for physique athletes? And I'm going to give you some of my personal feelings about this because growing up, you got to remember, I grew up watching, the pumping iron guys. So you had Franco Columbu, you had Arnold Schwarzenegger and Serge Nubret, all of these guys that had immaculate physiques. And one of the centerpieces of that body of art always started at the chest. So that was something that was always appealing, right? You see the muscle guys in the magazines or on the beach, and they have very well developed pectorals. Or you're looking at the superheroes, right? When you're watching cartoons as a kid. So for me, I was always interested in developing that area of the body, in proportions to the arms and shoulders and the back and these things. But definitely, I think a high focus for young boys and young men growing up. And I want to start by talking about the function of the pecs, right? Everyone's familiar with things like chest presses, bench press, push-ups, things like this. But if we actually look at the anatomical function of the pec muscles, we've got two main groups, right? We've got the pectoralis major and the pectoralis minor. So if we look at, starting with pectoralis major, the bigger, the most dominant portion of the chest muscles, it's going to be responsible for moving the arms, right, proximal to the body, so inwards towards that center line, and then also upwards, right? If we're thinking about sweeping or scooping that motion up towards that collarbone area and also proximal towards the center of the body, that's going to be the pec major. If we think about the pec minor, that's going to be more responsible for bringing the shoulder and upper arm downward, right? So inferior motion. And if we look at the innervated portion of it, right, the pecs are actually innervated by the lateral pectoral nerve. So just some anatomy kind of 101 for you guys. And if you think about the joint action for any of the most common chest development exercises, right, if we're thinking about chest fly, if we're thinking about a barbell or a dumbbell chest press, diverging or converging types of presses, all of these things have very similar joint action where we're targeting those three main motions that we just talked about, right? One thing that, so I'm a fan of this, right? And I enjoy reading different studies for hypertrophy and also specific muscle groups. But one thing that stood out to me recently, there was a newer study that talks about how much volume is enough or too much volume, right? There's always this kind of debate out in the industry of, is there a point at which even for well-trained athletes that we start to hit the overtraining or, athletic burnout? And that can definitely be an issue, right? But there's a newer study that says, hey, I know you guys are accustomed to 18 to 20 sets of training volume per muscle group per week, but there could be more than that for well-trained athletes. This recent study I read was actually published by Med Science Sports Exercise on October 6th of this year. A buddy of mine actually through social media, Tacido Souza Jr. actually shared this, and I found it fascinating. What this study dove into was actually 52 sets per muscle per week was the optimal number that they found. So one would argue, right, why and how can we achieve the adaptations at this really high volume, comparing back to 18, 20, 24 sets to now we're saying 52 sets, and people that are developed enough are still getting results. And the basis of the argument there is that as a beginner, right, the body, if you're training the chest muscles, for instance, isn't going to be as resilient, and it's not going to have that muscle maturity to be able to support those higher volumes. But if we think about the terms like progressive overload, if we think about SAID principle, right, specific adaptations to impose demands, over time, as the body matures, these muscles get stronger, they rebuild back higher than homeostasis levels, right? Over a period of time, these athletes actually experienced results at as high as 52 sets per muscle per week. So that was something that I found very fascinating. So when we get down into some programming, I'm going to lay things out for maybe a beginner. I don't even want to say athlete, but somebody who is just a lifestyle client, and then, an athlete, and then a really advanced athlete who's maybe been training for 10 plus years. So some good stuff there, but I encourage you guys, go check out that article. I found some really good insights there that give you just different ways to think about muscle hypertrophy and what the optimal training volume is per week. If you guys are just joining us, this is your boy, Andre Adams, here with the NASM Peak Physique Podcast. We are talking about everything regarding chest development. So I want to share with you guys some of my favorite fundamental chest exercises. And I'll tell you some stories too, kind of growing up. I would always get asked about what are my favorite chest development exercises, because that was one of my strongest features as an Olympian level physique athlete. And the truth is, I started training with kind of the bare bones of equipment. I actually turned pro basically training out of my home gym, right? I did maybe 25% of my workouts in a commercial gym at the time. But my father actually started training me when I was 12, 13 years old, and fundamental lifts for the chest. So a lot of barbell bench press, a lot of dips. So if you think about parallel bar dips, right, where we're hinged forward and we're getting a little bit more into the chest, a lot of pec flies, be it dumbbells or, a pec deck, cable crossovers, these type of essential movements. And they were very basic. I laugh now looking back, like we kind of lifted like cavemen, right? We had a pair of dumbbells, some barbells, and some plates and a bench. And that's what I went pro on. So you can really develop the chest through basic fundamental movements with enough volume and frequencies. And of course, your nutrition has to be on point. And you've got to be working the ancillary muscles as well so that everything's growing in proportion. But to get that thickness and the density in the pecs, one thing that definitely helped me achieve that personally, even as a youngster, was putting that progressive load and really getting enough stimulus on the muscle to get the response, right? And I started noticing changes at a pretty early age, probably 15, 16, 17 years old. I still remember some of my training partners when I was that age. And these guys were, 3, 4, 5 years older than me. And I was trying to keep up with them. So I'm maybe 140 pounds back then, right? And I was bench pressing maybe 190 pounds, which is, I look back and I laugh, but we all start somewhere, right? And I remember struggling with that weight for so long, but I would be so sore for the next few days. And as you learn more about nutrition, you learn more about the recovery curve, you're able to, continue and progress. And then you're optimizing your form as well as you're getting more skilled on the actual movement. And to develop the chest, I started noticing a big change in the density and the strength from all my different chest exercises, and also working complementary muscles. So if you think about the joint action and which muscle groups are firing during a bench press, where you've got, pec major, pec minor, that's really getting the grunt of the work. But then on different portions of that lift, you've got some recruitment from the lats, right? The serratus to stabilize, and then the triceps to go through the elbow extension at the top. All of these ancillary movements, once you bring up those muscle groups, it actually makes your bench press go way up. And so I learned this at a very young age from, being trained by my father at the time, and then getting into powerlifting. And over those next 3 to 4 years, from let's say 18 to about 21, I became a competitive powerlifter. And I would compete in a what I would consider now a smaller class, right? I was cutting down to 165 pounds, whereas today I walk around as high as 240 pounds. But back then at 165, during those 3 years, just learning fundamental movements, increasing my strength, my muscle activation, and density of the muscles, I was able to take my bench press from about 225 pounds to just under 400 pounds at that 165 pound weight. And that was raw with no lifting straps or, assistance or anything like this. And what I noticed is as I started to build up all these different muscle groups that were supporting the movements like the chest and the fly and the dips, it allowed me to go much, much heavier on the fundamental ones like the bench press. And then it just really accelerated the development through different parts of the chest. Now, one thing I want to pause and say there is as you get stronger and stronger, especially working with barbells for you physique athletes, when we're talking about an aesthetic physique goal, we need to keep in mind symmetry. So one thing that I noticed years later, once I got very heavy into bodybuilding, is that I had an imbalance left to right, right? Aesthetically, you can see it. You can measure these things with a tape, or you can even hop on an in-body, right? Or a DEXA scan and see how much skeletal muscle is on the left and the right. And so what you end up doing is you get more advanced for chest development is you start to focus on unilateral movements. So things like an isolateral chest press, you might want to work more with dumbbells than barbells. And it allows your body to remain symmetric, not only in strength, but also in aesthetics, right? In proportion. So that was one thing that as my chest training got more advanced, I started to break out more complex movements, more unilateral movements, a lot more machine work too. As you get older, the joints, they don't love the free weights, right? So I went from at my peak, bench pressing over 500 pounds to, current state. I still bench press heavy sometimes, but for the most part, you can maintain a lot of that muscle mass and maturity just through really good quality movements on a machine or cables. As you heard myself and my good friend, 2008 Mr. Olympia Dexter Jackson talk about on a previous episode. So as you get more advanced, start focusing on muscle activation, right? So the mind-muscle connection, start focusing on fundamental movements and progressive overload as you get stronger throughout your lifts. That's going to help you develop different areas of the chest. So definitely go through different movements too, right? And incorporate a variety of movements that have that, that movement where we're recruiting more of the pec major. We might be sweeping up towards our collarbone, right? Proximal to the body. You might be getting that extra stretch through a chest fly. So make sure that you're moving through a variety of movements and planes of motion. Even some things like a TRX chest press, which a lot of physique athletes might not think about, but it helps you stabilize and recruit different muscle fibers that maybe you normally wouldn't. So we'll touch on that in a moment too, about different phases of our OPT model and how those can be incorporated into your chest development as well. So again, if you guys are just joining us, it's your boy, Andre Adams, NASM Master Trainer and IFBB Olympian athlete. We're talking about how to develop those IFBB Pro chest muscles. So let's get down into some programming. We talked about some of my favorite exercises, and I'll maybe run through a few more. Everything from, I do love me some barbell bench press. I can't lie. However, again, as you get more advanced in the physique training, you do want to break those apart a bit with some more unilateral, isolateral work. But I love incline dumbbell chest press as well, where you're blasting not only this upper portion of the chest, which is very hard to develop, but it allows you to actually converge at the top and really get that extra squeeze in the inner upper portion of the chest, which is very difficult to achieve for most physique athletes. Nautilus Nitro Pec Fly. If you have not seen one of these, I highly encourage you to Google it, look it up, find one near you. We've got one in our gym at Snap Fitness Kenosha, and it's an amazing piece of equipment that allows you to sweep the arms down. You're actually loaded at the upper arm versus holding a traditional pec fly at the wrist where you've got multiple joints. You actually load it right at that upper arm, and it allows you to get down into almost a most muscular type of pose and really blast that outer and then right down the center of the pecs. So great piece of equipment, one of my fundamental staples for chest development. And then we've got things like old school pullovers, if you're not familiar with them, where we're taking that easy curl bar off the floor, we're supine flat on our back, And we're working through, this is a great one actually for a chest and back day, but we're pulling over, and at the top of that movement, we're going to definitely get some really good pec activation, the serratus anterior, and then you're also going to get some upper lat and teres involved on the initial portion of that movement. So I love some old school pullovers, loaded parallel bar dips. If you're feeling pretty hardcore that day, you're getting stronger, body weight's not enough, you can always put some weighted chains around the neck or use a weighted belt to give yourself some extra loading and resistance on parallel bar dips. Supine lateral or unilateral dumbbell raise. So that's one, again, where we're breaking apart left and right, and we're going to be sweeping and scooping that arm up where our hand is supinated, and we're flexing that pec major as we're sweeping that dumbbell across our center line. You can do this with a cable as well. Another great way, if you've got a lagging side, you want to prioritize that side first. Let that one determine how many reps you're going to do on the dominant side, right? So definitely incorporate at least one unilateral movement per workout for the chest. And then I'm going to leave you guys with this too. Let's think about, what would a full chest workout look like? There's a million different ways we could do this, but I'll give you one good example of how I might piece together, we'll call it an intermediate chest routine for you guys. So one thing that I want to definitely make sure that you guys are incorporating is your warm-ups and activations. We want to make sure that all that muscle fascia is moving efficiently, the joints are moving efficiently, and everything's nice and stable before we begin, anything like a heavy chest press. So I like to warm up 3 to 5 minutes cardio, get some oxygenated blood flowing through the body, get you primed up. If you had your pre-workout, it's an opportunity to get that circulated through your body. And then we're going to do some foam rolling and stretching. I try to keep this to 5 minutes or less, right? Because we're all on a tight schedule. After work, you're trying to get your workout in, or before work. So try to keep your warm-ups to about 5 minutes or less. If you feel tightness anywhere specifically, those are the areas I like to focus on with some static or dynamic stretching. And then, for me personally, I tend to get some tightness or, sticking in the upper lats and teres, even across the serratus. So I'll usually hit those with the foam roller real quick. I've even seen some great content on the NASM channel recently on Instagram. So definitely follow along, because we're constantly posting tips on warm-ups and activations. Once I get through my stretches and my foam rolling, the next thing I do is go into at least 2 to 3 movements that are going to get those shoulder blades, right? The scaps nice and stable. We're going to get those rotator cuffs moving. So you could do some external rotations with some bands, where we're getting all the small muscle fibers and, the secondary muscles firing around the rotator cuff. I do like to do some scapular push-ups, especially if you're prone to things like winging of the scaps, things that are going to help get everything firing in the right direction. Another one of my favorites, and this could actually be an entire workout for a phase 2, like strength endurance type of workout, is stacking, let's say, my first 1 to 2 feeder sets of a chest press. Let's say I'm doing a lighter weight there, right? 10 to 15 reps just to warm up, get the joints moving. And then I might stack that with 1 or 2 sets of stability ball push-ups. And I know it sounds pretty easy for a lot of you guys, right? Because you're in an elevated position. I dare you to try it. This is actually one of my favorite routines for activating the pec muscles and also increasing shoulder stabilization. So, you can put that ball right up against the bench or hold it against the wall. You want to make sure that core is nice and tight, set those scaps and shoulders in position, and then take yourself through 10 to 15 push-ups on the stability ball before you get into your heavy chest work. Now you're ready, right? You're primed up, you're ready to go. So for this workout, and I encourage you guys to try this, tag us on Instagram later. I want to get some feedback. If it's a bench day, let's say we're doing 5 sets of bench, we're going to work through maybe 6 to 12 reps, primarily sticking in that hypertrophy phase. But for you guys that like to lift a little heavier, by all means, you can pyramid up each set until you're at that top working set, and take your pick, right? You can start flat. You can mix in some incline or decline. If you tend to have a lagging area like myself, I tend to do a little bit more incline work now, since the lowers are more developed than uppers. So you got to kind of tailor this to your physique and your personal goals. But I would start with some form of a heavier compound press, and then pyramid up in weight, each set, 5 sets, 6 to 12 reps. keep a moderate tempo there, right? So about 2 seconds eccentric, 2 second concentric, and you can mix in some different variables in there as well. But I like to start there, get my heavy stuff out of the way first while I'm fresh. I normally don't superset my very heavy compound movement. Same thing on leg or back day, right? I don't like supersetting my deadlifts or my heavy back squats. And we're going to apply that same principle to chest press. Now, once we've got that heavy compound movement out of the way, we're going to want to get more of those auxiliary or ancillary movements. So exercise 2, let's go with lying pullovers, right? We're going to blast. This can be on a chest day or it can be mixed into a chest and back day. 8 to 12 reps, sticking in that hypertrophy range. You can do these a number of ways. You can do them standing on a cable stack where we're sweeping the arms down with the hips hinged forward a bit and really getting into that upper lat and that insertion point by the teres. I prefer personally to do them supine, laying flat on my back on a bench, and I like to use an easy curl bar. I feel like I get the best stretch out of this, and I also get the best pump and muscle activation for my body. So I encourage you to try different modalities and see what you feel the best response with for your body. But I'm going to go with supine, lying pullovers with an easy curl bar, and then I'm going to step it up a notch for you advanced guys and girls out there. Once you bring that bar over to the chest, if you're really feeling aggressive on chest day, you can actually integrate a close grip chest press with that pullover. And then you would alternate those two movements from a close grip chest press back to the pullover. I like to work through those 8 to 12 reps, 4 sets. After that, let's go to chest flies, right? We've got to get at least one motion here where we're really stretching out that muscle fascia. And some of the top forms or modalities for that could be a cable chest fly. It could be a seated pec deck. It could be that Nautilus Nitro inverted pec deck that I just shared with you a bit earlier. I'm going to stick with free weights since that's how I turned pro back in the day. We're going to go dumbbell chest flies. So laying on your back, or you could do this in an inclined position, 45 degrees or less if you have some lagging areas again in the upper chest. And you want to go, one important thing when you're doing those kind of chest flies, you'll see a lot of the guys and girls online that, they really got this extended range of motion. You got to be careful there so you don't have any injuries to the biceps tendons or ligaments and things like this. So I encourage people, feel the tension through the full range of motion and focus on that half-second contraction up top where you're really getting deep into those pecs. Don't overextend on the way down. It's one of the common mistakes I see where people eventually it leads to injury. So make sure you're staying within a safe range of motion, constant tension throughout that full range, hard squeeze on the top of those dumbbell or cable chest flies. Let's go with 4 sets there, 8 to 12 reps, anywhere from 0 to 60 seconds of rest between sets. And feel free to mix in a superset of another chest exercise. But after we get through those chest flies, I like to finish up by blasting the inner portion of the chest, right? So something like a Sven press, if you're not familiar, you can take 2 plates, let's say 2 10s or 2 25s, and I want you to mash them together, which is going to require some tension right inward, which is going to activate those pecs. And then we're going to normally lay on, let's say, a 45-degree inclined bench, and we're going to be pressing those straight out perpendicular to the body. And again, that's going to recruit all different areas of the chest, from the pec minor to the pec major, even getting down into those fibers down the center of the chest that are really hard to reach. So I like to stick there 3 to 4 sets. Those are a little higher volumes, typically lighter weight, 12 to 15 reps. Good time under tension there to really blast those pecs and fully exhaust them, burn them out at the end of your chest day. And you, my friend, have just finished a really solid chest day. Now, as you get more advanced, let's think back to that article that we mentioned, right? The 52 sets per week versus 20 to 24. You could slowly start to progress either the intensity, you could progress the load and the resistance you're using, or you could progress the sets and rep volume, depending on what your goal is and how fast you're able to attain those adaptations throughout the pec muscles. So guys, that's the essence of what I wanted to communicate to you today. For all of you that have asked me over the years, Andre, how have you developed those Olympian level pecs? That's my formula. I stick to the basics, stick to what works, and then start to sprinkle in some variety and progressions over time. And I promise you, you will see some results. So for you guys that are just tuning in, or if this is your first episode, you can find me on Instagram. It's at Andre Adams Official. And you can also email me if you have questions and things that you'd like to ask me personally. And I always encourage you guys too, if you've got ideas for us that you'd like us to present on the show, on a subsequent episode, by all means, email me. It's trainingbydre@gmail.com, or you can get a hold of me through the website at www.andreadamsofficial.com. And all we ask for this content, if you're enjoying it, if you feel like you learned something today, I encourage you to please share it with at least one friend. And we look forward to seeing you guys back on the next episode. Signing off.